front of this quarterly journal features a large satirical portrait of the late King Friesel. From the sides of his head, a pair of white antlers spread to the corners of the cover. Because Friesel was incompetent, foolish, and cruel. In short, the embodiment of everything the communards wished to overthrow. It's satire, you see. To your disappointment, there aren't any full-color pictures to direct your attention. Just column after column of closely set text, interrupted occasionally by little doodles in black and white. After rifling the pages with your thumb several times, you return to the table of contents. The magazine is divided into several sections: international developments, Kunst und Kultur, and local concerns. Just inside the cover, there's also an editor's note. Comrade, as you know, this journal takes its name from Mazov's immortal expression, du cristal à la fumée. This was his way of describing the way the rigid, crystalline structures of capitalist ideology turn to smoke under communism. But, like the structures of capitalist ideology, we too are at risk of going à la fumée, unlike many publications which are content to spoon-feed their readers reassuring drivel. La Fumée is committed to telling the radical truth, even when that truth may drive away potential subscribers. So please, if you value our radical Mazovian perspective on contemporary politics, culture, and international affairs, please consider subscribing today. Yours in struggle, the editors.
What do you expect? It was laying around the office of the Debarders Union. They're probably bankrolling the thing.
You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. It takes a moment, but gradually it dawns on you that Kunst und Kultur must mean arts and culture. It evokes a sense of recognition and fellowship among those privileged enough to understand. As you leaf through this section, you come across several reviews of recent radio plays, as well as a brief artist spotlight featuring a local artist identified only as CS. The main feature, though, is a long essay titled Tip Top Tournée, a critical Mazovian perspective. The Tip Top Tournée is an inter-isolari racing series, mostly known for its high speeds, ludicrous sponsorship deals, and high death toll. In Revachol, it's held quadrennially on the prestigious Zero Carousel racing circuit. This so-called artist spotlight is really just a brief Q&A, made all the briefer by the subject's evident hostility to her interviewer. You think you're settling in for a relaxing recap of the most recent season, maybe sprinkled with some nice anecdotes about a few of the more colorful drivers. Instead, you find yourself skimming a 10,000-word feature about all the politically problematic aspects of Tip Top Tournée. Where to even start? For one, there's the crass commercialism of its sponsorships, and then there's the practically criminal emphasis on deadly motor crashes. So, all of it, basically. Oddly enough, this article has 2 bylines: Nasteb Encolada Bernal and Exilus Buka. There's no way those are real names. Have you ever met anyone named Exilus? Come on, they're plainly pseudonyms. Under capitalism, the article says, every pursuit has its price. Every pleasure, even one as elemental as the joy of racing others around a track, is reduced to an advertising opportunity. Thus, the so-called tournée becomes a competition between increasingly meaningless brand signifiers. Your discount laundry detergent racing against a pack of Astra cigarettes, or even a Fritta. And that precisely is what's problematic about it. Were it not for the promise of random, spectacular violence, audiences would quickly lose interest. At the end of the day, It's the destruction of these 750,000 real races that you're really watching for. Sure, you think that, but subconsciously, it's the visions of brand names being engulfed in flames that you crave. That may be true of your casual factory-issued tip-topper, but you're a genuine talk dog. You practically live for the wail of those superchargers. Believe what you want, but your fascination with machines you'll never so much as touch in real life is itself a textbook example of commodity fetishism. In other words, it's not the engines you covet, but the feeling of freedom they're made to signify for you.
Ah, come on. Can this article read your mind? Well, there you have it. No reason to get hung up on the pretentious ramblings of a few young men. If I had to wager, I'd say they've never even seen the inside of a motor, much less a motor race. I take whatever they write with a large grain of salt.
You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. Unsurprisingly, much of this section is taken up with articles declaring unqualified support for the dock workers' strike. You skim the headlines. Paint the harbor red and white. Martinez tames the wild pines. A city in revolt. First we take Martinez, then we take La Delta. Finally, there's a brief article by the writer G. Martin accusing the owner of the Capeside apartments of illegally attempting to evict certain communist tenants simply for not having paid their rent. The writer G. Martin remarks dryly that capitalists love wealth redistribution so long as it's only redistributed upward. It's true, the rentiers have been bleeding you dry. You really ought to find your own place one of these days. You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you. This section includes a long, tedious critique of the latest round of free trade negotiations between the EPIS nations and the Free State of Semenine. You also skip over an article about heavy fuel oil smuggling along the Messina border. Something about bear wrestling in Samara, book riots in Yugograd. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Bear wrestling. Flip back to that. It seems to be part of a new public fitness initiative in the People's Republic of Samara, SRV, devised and promoted by none other than President Kaczynski himself. According to this extremely credulous account, Uncle Sport, as he's affectionately known to his people, has recently decreed bear wrestling the national sport of the SRV. Based on the description in this article, he appears to be an extremely competent and democratically elected president. Sapormat Sport Kaczynski is well into his third decade as president of the SRV. Outside Samara, he's known for three things: brutal repression of internal dissent, monumental corruption, and a near pathological obsession with physical fitness. It's quite straightforward. A standard match features one man, or in some cases woman, against one bear. Two competitors, one ring, 5 rounds, or until incapacitation. According to the SRV's Ministry of Information, the program has been a tremendous success. Public support stands at 87%, and youth obesity and alcoholism rates are down 12% and 7% respectively. That's very much the idea. President Kaczynski has long maintained that a strong body is the best defense against capitalist aggression.
The Samaran People's Republic? No, I should expect not. Why do you ask? They are quite the spectacle, as I understand. I've heard they make the people in the front rows wear plastic sheets. On account of the blood, you see.
You flip back to the front of the magazine. The table of contents unfolds before you.
Thoughts, baby. A million little lights in the dark. You're one fine instrument, brother. All those faces and all those names. All that laughter and screaming and scheming around. Every corner and every street.
Recorded in you, forever, on ferrotape.
On and on it goes, for untold hours. At the disco where you first asked her to dance. Rising, rising, above the dark curvature, the great wingspan of sleep. Studded with stars.
Behold, there are millions of them down there. The first time, the last time, the smoke in her mouth, the plotted flowers, the faces turning, changing.
It's the world, Harry boy, and you're made of it. Every day you're out there, you make more of yourself from it. I'm afraid you can't be unmade now. You can never forget this shit.
All stuck on loop, whirling, spitting out words and images.
You're the son of the world again, Harrister. A ceaseless agent, picking up litter and old newspapers, collecting your little bubblegum wrappers and idiotic picture postcards. Meaningless keepsakes.
Reading your awful letters and recalling things, aren't you? The endless names of the world. An address book you are. The map of a city.
You'll go insane if you keep going like this. One more day, and you'll be in the loony bin. I just know you will. And for what, brother man?
For the working class.
Solving your little crossword puzzles. Doing your tasks. Crossing names off lists. Trying to become some sort of world detector. It won't make it okay. It won't put smoke back in her mouth.
He's got no idea what he's in for.
'Cause only love can break your heart. Beep, beep, beep. The alarm is ringing, Harry. The disco circus goes on and on. You barely slept 3 hours last night.
You can do it. It's nothing. Do it for the city. Go. Do it for the wind. Do it for the picture puzzle. Put it all together. Solve the world. One conversation at a time. Rise and shine, comrade. It's time to get to work. Despite all the thinking you've been doing, only 0.0001% of communism has been built. It's too great a task to undertake alone. You're going to have to get organized. Organization hasn't exactly been your strong suit, historically speaking. The condition of your paperwork is irrelevant. All that matters is your commitment to building the world republic. You must seek out your revolutionary brothers and sisters. Find out how much communism they've built. Then, together, maybe you'll be able to build as much as 0.0002% of communism. But it won't be easy. Decades of persecution by coalition authorities have driven the remaining communists of Martinaise underground. They live underground. These communists aren't men. They're mole people. They're not mole people. They're your comrades in the eternal class struggle. It's your task to find and join them. Possibly, if you have been, it's only because you're a double agent acting in furtherance of your long-term objectives. Listen to this. Do you really think you're the kind of person an underground communist cell would entrust with a mission that requires such discretion? Regardless, what's past is past. You need to look forward to the work of building communism for all. Just between us, you may want to lay off this grind up the bourgeoisie stuff. It's a bit off-putting, even to fellow communists. Let your nose guide you, detective. No, we meant your nose, as in that swollen muck detector in the center of your face. It just happens to be perfectly calibrated for sensing communists. We really have no idea what they're talking about. There's no linkage between ideology and olfaction. Failure. That's why you're perfect for the job. No one's got a better nose for failure than you, Harry. What you're smelling is your own body odor, of course. Nothing a shower and change of clothes couldn't fix. People sometimes complain there are no real communists left in Martinaise. But you can smell their presence. They're out there, waiting for you to join them. Incidentally, during the waning days of the anti-centennial revolution, a number of Revacholian communards constructed elaborate hideouts in abandoned root cellars, hollowed out tree trunks, and even residential sewage tanks. This latter phenomenon gave rise to the early anti-communist slogan, "The future's bright when you flush out the white." First, you'll have to locate the remaining communists in Martinaise. When you get near to someone with revolutionary potential, your nose will give you the signal to establish contact. Again, no, it won't. Any olfactory response you perceive will be strictly psychosomatic. Judging from the bust of Krasmazov and other revolutionary paraphernalia you discovered, it seems that the Cape Side apartments may be a hotbed of communist activity. You'll discuss the monumental world historical task that lies before you. You'll engage in rigorous and spirited debates about Mazovian theory and practice. But mostly, you'll probably complain about other communists. Not at all. Complaining about other communists is one of the most important parts of being a communist. Here we go. Wake, brave worker. 'Tis no time for bed. Fight till there's no slaves below and no masters overhead. Wait, no. Something about this bunch doesn't smell right. They are, but they don't seem too keen to talk with you, do they? No, they don't. Glenn seems to be contemplating grievous bodily harm while he massages his raw knuckles. In the far back, Eugene is doing his best to ignore you. And from his perch at the end of the table, Titus Hardie himself stares at you with a cold contempt that makes you want to leave the cafeteria straight away. Besides, you're pretty sure they consider themselves social democrats. There, do you smell that? Can you not detect that inimitable whiff of dissatisfaction and restlessness, that sense that the world is in need of dramatic, even violent reordering? Can you smell it now? You inhale. The cilia along your olfactory epithelium tingle with excitement as they sift through the swirling morass of industrial odors. First come the smells of the agitated strikebreakers, layers of body oil and sweat, over-buttered meals pulled from Bakelite lunch pails, the biting stench of lye soap. And then there's the slowly oxidizing metal gates, the scent of stale grease emanating from every crack.
Everything in order, detective? You're smelling for... You know what? I'll just leave you to it. Carry on, detective.
It is a mark of the lieutenant's respect for you that he does not press you on this decidedly extracurricular errand. The lieutenant lacks your highly developed politico-olfactory cortex. The reek of communism is undeniable, and it's coming from that railing right there. Yes, now's your chance to establish contact. But be easy about it. Communists have been known to charge when startled.
Hola, wandering man. How can I help you? What's that, boy, yeah?
Now's your chance. Remember, communists are notoriously skittish, so it's best to insinuate your way in. Hold on. This isn't a man who goes in for subterfuge. He prefers someone who'll look him in the eye and say exactly what's on his mind.
Now, that is an important subject, but also a sensitive one. Still, good of you to just come straight out with it. No beating around the bush.
Yes, he certainly has a way of just coming out and saying things that normal people wouldn't.
So you've given up copying and now you're hunting comunistas. Care to say why? Oh, I see. I wish I could help. Unfortunately, I don't know many comunistas. Some are, some aren't. It's a big institution, room for all kinds. Comunistas, feminist supremacists, even an anti-institutional boyadero.
Alright, so if he isn't personally a communist, he's definitely hanging out with them.
Ah, but you know, I did meet a genuine ideologo a few months ago. Perhaps he's your guy. You know, a guy with a theory. Someone who likes to pit his theory against other theories in deadly theory combat. It was late one night as I was leaving the harbor. He was waiting on the corner in a bright white jacket, classic Saramirizian style. He asked me for a light. We shared cigarettes. Then he asked me if I ever thought about getting into some of the extra physical branches of communism. No idea. I took it to mean he was asking me to join some sort of underground cell. A very old school organizing technique. The sort of thing comunistas used to do before the revolution. The same thing I always tell people who try to press some claim on me. I said, every boyadero rides alone. I couldn't tell you. Once I declined his offer, we finished our cigarettes and he disappeared back into the night. Just before he melted into the shadows, he turned to me and said, "Remember Dobrava and Abadanais." And then he was gone. I don't know. Guess not everyone remembers. Been wondering about that myself. Some comunista inside talk of me. Not meant for the wider public. They love that kind of thing. You'd have to ask someone who knows this ideologo personally. I have to say though, it sounds like you found yourselves a proper hunt.
The man whispers a jaunty tune. A coastal breeze ruffles his hair. There it is again. There's a spectral scent haunting this pair, no doubt. And it smells like sea brine mostly, because it's a pair. Years of turmoil, of hopes and dreams, ground beneath the inexorable tides of capital. What do you smell? The first thing that strikes you is the overwhelming brine. You imagine yourself underwater, a 100-legged anthropod scuttling along the murky silt at the bottom of the sea. But then the unmistakable reek of seagull shit hits you, buoyed along on the air currents. An acrid melody atop mouldering cords of wood rot and heavy fuel oil.
Still smelling for communist, detective? No offense, detective, but you're not particularly subtle.
The lieutenant's right. It's sort of amazing how unsubtly you're sniffing the air around you. Almost like you're trying to call attention to yourself. What the lieutenant thinks is irrelevant. Your politico-olfactory cortex is lighting up like a holiday display. The scent of communism is overwhelming, and it's coming right from that balcony over there. Certainement, a precocious communist youth, a symbol of a kinder, more hopeful future. Now's your chance to establish contact with your revolutionary brothers and sisters. A chance to establish contact with the future. What a beautiful, terrible thought.
Hello again, officers. Have you come to admire my mural? And what do you know about politics? An underground cell? My. Sounds big time. Sure, I know someone who'd love to talk that ideological stuff. You're looking for Steban, a right communist who runs a mega cool and very secret meeting. He might. No. Keep your money. What I want from you's better than gold.
Don't look so deflated. Whatever she asks, you keep your chin up. A wicked grin extends across her face. A laughing skull. Death hilarious. This is gonna be bad.
Oink for me, piggy. Just once. Be a good pig now. No oink, no goods. Wrong! This is exactly how I treat my little brother. Well. Seems like we're dealing with one tough pig. I'm impressed.
Yes, somehow you managed to oink with at least a modicum of dignity. The lieutenant, needless to say, is not impressed.
Sounds like you're really serious about meeting Steban. It's touching, sort of. Steban's group meets only at night, in an old room in these apartments here. It just so happens you're in luck. Their weekly meeting is tonight. Poke your snout around sometime after 10 p.m. and you might just find them. Just that he's a real communist. Not like the play acting you've been doing. The rest you'll have to see for yourself. Oh, smart pig. Because there is. See, Steban's a bit on the paranoid side. He's got all these mega secret passphrases to keep out infiltrators and the like. You can't join the meeting without one.
Not to interfere in your personal errand, but I wonder whether it might have something to do with that phrase Mañana mentioned overhearing.
The lieutenant nods.
Guess this is what happens when two pigs put their heads together. That's enough. Off with you then.
As you approach the metal grill, you can hear several voices having what appears to be an animated discussion. This must be it. Beyond this door lies the beating heart of radical communism in Martinez. Somehow, the night air softens the smell of trash and sea brine. As the breeze pulls through the canvas like a shuttle through a loom, you catch a hint of something unexpected. Something earthy, warm, and burnt. The acrid smell of failure. No, that's just slightly burnt coffee. A smell you would recognize anywhere.
Just look at these pigs sniffing about after hours. Must have slipped my mind. You know how it goes.
The metal grill is cool to the touch. You notice the lieutenant is looking uncustomarily anxious. His posture is rigid. His right hand hovers near the zipper of his jacket. He wants so badly to draw his armistice, but he also doesn't want to draw it.
Something's not right here. The equation doesn't quite balance. Which is just to say, we should be prepared for any eventuality.
You can make out at least two separate voices. Two voices, both male, approximately early 20s.
Careful with those now.
I have it. It's going to work. I can feel it.
The clang of metal reverberates all along the scaffolding. The voices coming from the other side fall silent. A pair of frightened hares cowering in some dark crevice of their burrow.
Who's there? Is that you, Maurice? Ever hear of the Wayfarer Act, you coalition pawn? Come back when you've got a warrant, or when you've woken up to your own class interests.
For a moment, silence. A slight sensation of static electricity as before a storm. A miniature conference is taking place inside, and you are the subject.
What's the passphrase?
There's no response. You begin to wonder whether they've slipped out some back way. No, they're still there. You can feel them back there.
All right. The key's taped to the back of the door frame. Just make sure you put it back when you're done, and do wash the concrete. It just kind of falls away, in places.
Charmant. After you, detective.
Have fun at your underground meeting, Pig. Hope it's a blast.
The two young men are either oblivious to or ignoring your entrance. Their attentions are fixed on whatever it is they're stacking in the middle of the floor. Matchboxes, it appears.
I think it's holding, Ulixes.
It is.
It's definitely not holding. Those matchboxes are stacked so haphazardly, it's like they want them to collapse.
Careful, careful. Damn, hardly any difference. You two, you are late.
They should know the meeting starts at 10 p.m. sharp.
One leader and one follower. The most ancient power dynamic. There's a great deal of tension in this young man's shoulders, more than someone his age should bear. Meanwhile, his companion inclines toward him, eager to catch every word that dribbles from his friend's mouth. Just a moment. Could this be the former owner of a certain jacket you acquired recently? Don't let them see you flustered, sire. Play along.
That's the whole point, of course. We can't just have anybody waltzing in here. Martinez is crawling with reactionary infiltrators. There are RCM spies, for one. Just recently, someone even broke into my apartment, if you can believe it. To say nothing of Gottwaldians and iconoclasts.
The young man's companion reflexively snorts at the mention of Gottwaldians and iconoclasts.
We all have to take precautions, especially during these delicate times. What matters is that you've made it, and that you've done the reading.
No, detective. The only reading I've been doing is right here.
He seems to be wagging the notebook at you, as though he suspects you may have forgotten why you're here.
I have not had time to seek out pretentious communist book clubs, nor have I done their reading.
It doesn't sound like they've done the reading, Steban.
Well, this is getting awkward. I'm not sure what you're expecting to find here then.
There's profound consternation in his voice. You suspect it's about something bigger than your not having done the reading.
Maybe they can explain themselves.
In the most generous sense, I would say we're cultivating revolutionary consciousness.
Yes, that's probably the best way to describe it.
But more specifically, we are running a reading group. The most rigorous and theoretically advanced materialist reading group in Martinez.
Comrade Steban is a great discussion leader. One of the best at the university.
Yawn. Can you imagine anything duller than a bunch of binoclards yanking each other's knobs?
That's our whole thing. The world is so shallow, all noise and repetition. We're interested in genuinely radical critique.
Precisely. We are not interested in senseless parroting. We like to read critically.
Within the contours of Mazovian historical materialism, of course.
As though you can call that problem teaching.
One thing you learn quickly at university is that you're not going to find a real education in any lecture hall or discussion seminar.
We are post-attendance, basically.
Exactly. The only worthwhile part of the so-called École Normale de Reversol is the library. That's where we've made our greatest critical strides. We study all the foundational texts of Mazovian theory, of course. Just last week we finished the second volume of Puncher and Watman's Innocence of Capital.
Truly extraordinary.
And before that we spent 6 weeks on State and Plasm.
For some reason, the word plasm catches in your ear like a piece of old wax. This is fine. You can handle a list. In fact, you find the tedium strangely soothing.
We've also read Wertmüller's The Megastructure of History, and before that, Real and Reality.
Communist theorists love puns, in case that wasn't obvious.
Hablars une paix infernale.
The original Fisdale translation, not that watered-down revisionist garbage.
These two deserve the Order of Honor for bullshitting. There's no way they've actually read all this stuff.
Obviously.
But, of course, our special emphasis is on the theories of Ignaz Nilsson and his followers, especially the Infra-Materialists.
One of Krasmazov's closest associates, Ignaz Nilsson, was a leading political and military figure in the anti-centennial revolution. Today, Nilsson's reputation has waned in most parts of the developed world, with the exception of the People's Republic of Samara, SRV, where he is recognized as a founding father. His political philosophy is a variant of Mazovianism, called Nilssonist Mazovianism. The young man raises his fist in reply and gives you a curt nod.
He also happens to be the greatest communist theorist after Mazov himself. It was Nilsson who first postulated the existence of ideological plasm, which forms the basis of infra-materialist theory.
Those words again. You've got to find out what this infra-materialist stuff is all about. Whatever it is, one thing's perfectly clear. These young students have a much deeper understanding of communism than you do. You could learn a thing or two from them. If you can convince them you're one of them. The young man sighs. His companion looks about furtively.
Lynching? No. We're not an operational cell.
We think of ourselves as more of an intellectual vanguard.
Our stance? What? Do you want to know if the SRV has established a party line on the lynchings in Martinez?
Though historically speaking, the SRV has supported direct action against right-wing paramilitary squads, especially when they are doing the Indo-Tribe's dirty work.
Good point. So as a provisional matter, I can say we support it.
It's not that the boundary between sarcasm and sincerity is porous with these two. It's that they actually seem to overlap as though one is meant to conceal the other. It's always that way. Beneath the crust of irony, there's a molten sincerity that threatens to erupt forth. You may witness it yet.
No, we're an independent organization. We acknowledge and respect the union's efforts, but our interests are more theoretical than Mr. Clare's.
He speaks the truth.
That's easy. Crime is simply the inevitable expression of the injustice and incoherence embedded within capitalism itself.
Delivered with the smug assurance of a schoolboy reciting a maxim he's committed to memory.
It's a symptom, in other words, not a cause.
His companion can barely suppress a yawn.
No, unfortunately, the communards were hunted down and killed nearly to a man. All that's left of them are bones and old rifles.
His companion's eyes widen as you hold up the ancient weapon. He's practically itching to stick that thing in someone's face and pull the trigger.
Yes, like that one. I wonder how many of these are still lying around in cellars or sealed up behind the masonry. Can I hold it? It's heavier than I was expecting.
The attitude of a priest bearing one of the holy relics of his faith. Though it is long out of service, its power is evident to him. When he's finished, he returns the rifle to you with a nod of appreciation.
What do you mean? This is the reading group.
Kim and I.
We're in something of a rebuilding phase.
Some of our former comrades didn't have the ideological fortitude our work demands.
Intellectual attrition is maybe the best way to describe it. Felix said he couldn't keep up with the reading on top of his classwork. And Susanna wanted to read text other than Mazovian theory. Like novels, if you can believe it.
Imagine the audacity of wanting to read a novel in a reading group.
See? Even a gendarme gets it.
We've tried recruiting new members, but unfortunately the current intellectual climate is pretty hostile to infra-materialist thought. These days, if you're on the left, the ascendant schools are the Gottwaldians and their iconoclasts.
Don't forget about Maurice and the turnips.
Right. Then there was the whole turnip debacle. They're the most depressing school of communism. They love writing long books with a patina of Mazovian theory to cover up their cheap psychologizing.
A gang of cheap psychologists and intellectual midgets. Typical Gottwalders, in other words.
It's okay for Uli to say that because his dad is from Gottwald. The Gottwald school believe that intellectuals as a class are incapable of sparking revolutionary change, so all they can do is critique capitalism from inside itself. That's why they spend all their time smoking cigarettes and writing long works of criticism that make you want to commit suicide. It is miserable. That's probably why they're always committing suicide. You see, the Gottwald school look like communists. They talk like communists. But scratch the patina and you'll see beneath that they're just depressed liberals who've read too many books. For starters, they love talking about beans. That's right. Iconoclasts are obsessed with beans. They love thinking about beans. They love counting beans. But most of all, they love building models to predict how many beans there'll be in the future.
Nota bene, iconoclast is an extra pejorative form of the already pejorative name, Mazovian economists, a moderate school of Mazovianism which advocates the gradual transition to communism through carefully managed economic modernization rather than violent social revolution.
They're by far the most bean-centric school of communism.
Ah yes, the much maligned bean counters, ensconced in their think tanks and high-rises, believing they can save the world through a series of incremental, assiduously technocratic reforms.
If only. They've got all the beans accounted for in their asset sheets, their quarterly budgets, their future projections. But for some reason, there are never enough beans to go around. So we've just got to cut our bean rations in half.
And next thing you know, there are budget cuts, so now we've got to cut the bean rations in half again. You see, iconoclasts claim to be communists, but in reality they're just liberals with hard-ons for spreadsheets. Of course not. The only people who actually call themselves liberals are mouth-foaming reactionaries.
Basically indistinguishable from fascists. You'd need an X-ray machine to tell the difference.
Cindy is... how to describe her role?
Something of an ideological auxiliary, perhaps.
Yes, that's exactly how I would put it. And naturally, we support her radical counter-liberal aesthetics.
But she refuses to submit an essay, so we can't call her a member of the group per se.
That doesn't stop her from using the room for studio space, of course. It's an unfortunate story. You see, our ex-comrade Maurice is something of an economist.
He's studying macro and microeconomics.
Wow, a real intellectual, it sounds like.
Right. So a few weeks ago we were discussing the extra physical capabilities of the revolutionary state. And Maurice said, what were his exact words, Ulixes?
It was unbelievable. He said, turnips don't care if they are grown by communists, moralists or Welkin. They grow just the same.
Just a minute. Steban, Ulixes. Why do those names ring the faintest of bells? You should get to the bottom of this when you have the chance.
Basically, he was rejecting the whole foundation of infra-materialist theory. Simply that under suitably revolutionary conditions, crop yields naturally increase relative to non-revolutionary crops, which Morris somehow has the gall to deny.
Susanna said that he has been hanging out with some non-communists lately.
For us, the question boiled down to, if you don't even accept the basic ideas of Nielsen and infra-materialist theory, why are you in the reading group? Well, it wasn't so much that he was expelled.
He just quit coming. We haven't seen him around for weeks.
Go ahead.
The young man frowns at the little pile of boxes on the floor.
Nothing, just messing around until the meeting started.
They're watching those matchboxes awfully intently for two guys who are just messing around. It's almost as though they were trying to create the most unstable structure they could.
You've read our article.
That I did not expect.
The energy in the room has shifted ever so slightly in your favor. They're afraid they've somehow embarrassed themselves in front of you.
Well, don't keep us on tenterhooks. What did you think of the essay?
The delicate egos on these boys. Even though you're just some cop, they're desperate for your approval. Hey, you're not just some cop. You've got highly developed critical faculties. Now's your chance to show them off.
Well, I hope you'll let us know when your monograph is coming out.
I bet he's never written a substantial essay himself. He's really got no right to critique. None at all.
Well, there you did it. You stung them. And to what end?
We typically only accept new members once per semester. There's this whole process with essays and presentations on assigned topics. But given that we have some extra seating at the moment, I guess we could be convinced to expedite an application or two.
Steban, you can't be serious. For these gendarmes?
I am serious. As materialists, we've got to adapt to conditions as they are. Besides, he'll still need to pass the interview portion of the entrance process. Assuming he's even still interested, that is.
What's there to be scared of? You've really been cracking the books these last few days. You can go toe-to-intellectual toe with any reading group in Martinez. You've spent a not inconsiderable amount of time arranging the works in your mental library by theme and period. All the ideas and references you'll need are ready at hand. Now, chin up. You've got this.
Oh, you want to start now? Sure, we can manage that.
You've caught him off balance. The momentum is already in your favor.
Go ahead and take a seat. Since we haven't had time to prepare an exhaustive questionnaire, I think we can keep this interview more freeform. Why don't you tell us a bit about the books you're interested in, and we'll just see where the conversation goes. Aha, a real old-school pedestrian materialist. All right, we'll play along. So what sort of practical works are we talking about? Interesting. I always thought that stuff was common folk superstitions repackaged as bourgeois spiritualism. But maybe I've been overly dismissive.
This is a good start. They're starting to loosen up. You feel relaxed and in control. Soon, you're debating whether a decommodified spirituality is even possible under capitalism. Probably not, is the answer. Which isn't to say it isn't sometimes still useful.
There are so many theories out there, most of them ridiculous. But we'd be here all night if we tried to get into them.
It's better not to know. That's what the wind is telling you. These kids are eating out of your hand, practically. Another quarter of an hour disappears. The questions come rapid fire, but you have an answer for every one. Now you can sense things starting to slow down. The interview must be reaching an inflection point.
Don't you think, though, that you can only really understand current events if you have a firm background in history and political theory? Oh, right. We've been meaning to try that out.
Now's your chance to end this interview on a high note. Soon you're engaged in a thoughtful back and forth about the relationship between theme and mechanics. Best of all, your arguments are liberally seasoned with references to particular historical events and personages.
But then my issue with these historical cue pushes is that they offer the illusion of subjectivity even as they reinscribe the logic of colonialism itself. Though I'd love to hear your take on it.
He's only saying that because he likes getting thrashed like a schoolboy.
Listen, this is a forward-thinking group. It's entirely your business, of course. Anyway, we also enjoy a good board game every once in a while. The other week, Ulixes and I tried this new one where everyone is competing to manage their own zone of ecological catastrophe. You should see the components.
The irradiated waste tokens have this great metallic ochre sheen.
In any case, I think we've heard enough. We could use someone with your perspective in the group, with just a bit more theoretical foundation. I think you'll be making real contributions.
Yes, I would say he's got serious potential at least.
And with that, welcome to the most ideologically advanced materialist reading group in Martinez. Here's your first assignment. It's an overview of infra-materialist theory. A little basic, as you'll see, but one has to start somewhere. You're going to fit right in, I think. Come back when you're done. We'll be here pretty much every night after 10 p.m. Do be sure to take your time with the reading. We'll be eager to hear your thoughts.
The cover of this pocket-sized volume features a swirl of orange, yellow, and green. The title, A Brief Look at Infra-Materialism, is set in an authoritative yet approachable serif font. What an interesting color palette. It's vibrant, yet somehow leaves you ever so slightly nauseated. No. These are terrible colors. They're like apricots. On the inside jacket flap, you find a brief summary. What is infra-materialism? A highly theoretical branch of Masovian communism? A collection of mystical ramblings by a discredited revolutionary? Or possibly both? This brief look, TM, introduces readers to one of this century's most fascinating and misunderstood theories in a concise, jargon-free manner. The back of the book contains 4 or 5 pages of primary and secondary sources, but you'd need access to a university library to find most of them. In other words, this guide is the only source you're likely to find. You turn to the table of contents. The guide itself is divided into several sections with seemingly esoteric titles like Effects of Plasm on Root Vegetables and Mental Projection and Transference. There's also a brief introduction about the life of Ingus Nielsen, known to his numerous admirers as the evangelist of the revolution, and to his even more numerous enemies as the apocalyptic Shrike. Ingus Nielsen remains one of the most controversial and fascinating figures to emerge in the years of the anti-centennial revolution, second only to Krasmazov himself. During his unparalleled life, he helped guide a revolution in one country and found a new state in another. Along the way, he committed some of the most notorious war crimes in an era famed for its atrocities. And yet, his most fascinating contribution to history may be the most overlooked. His theory of ideological plasm, from which his followers and successors developed the school of communism known as Infra-Materialism. If you're like most people, you probably believe that your thoughts reside in your brain, right? That's not right at all. Thoughts don't exist in the brain. They float through the air. Your brain is but a fish swimming through them. Very interesting, and not so far removed from Ingus Nielsen's own theories. As Mazov's devoted comrade and leading theoretician, Nielsen was responsible for developing much of the intellectual foundation of communism, but his interests and speculations were famously wide-ranging. During his final years in exile, he produced, among other things, an early guide to home brewing, instructions for raising revolutionary children, plans for a universal pictographic language, and a detailed materialist critique of Dolores Day's chess strategy. A true man of ideas, equal to any of the great DeLorean polymaths. But one subject he returned to time and time again was the fundamental relationship between thoughts and matter. We may yet discover, he wrote in his notebooks, that under certain exceptional circumstances, the proletariat's embrace of historical materialism may be so fervent that their beliefs take form in the world of matter as a kind of revolutionary plasm. Certainly, in essence, Nielsen is arguing that thoughts don't just reside inside the brain, they radiate outward from it. According to this idea, the brain is an ideological transponder, constantly emitting waves of highly politicized energy, which Nielsen called plasm. Stay with us a moment longer. What's more, Nielsen speculated that this plasm, when it becomes powerful enough, might begin to influence the material reality surrounding it. Hence the name, Infra-Materialism. Unfortunately, Nielsen passed away before he was able to develop these initial ideas into a full-fledged theory. That work was left to subsequent generations of communist theorists. Building on Nielsen's basic insight, these theorists reached a startling conclusion that a sufficiently revolutionary state might begin to exhibit certain extra-physical effects based on the amount of plasm generated by its citizens. Correct, though certain particulars of the theory are commonly attributed to Nielsen himself, the evidentiary basis of those attributions has always been a point of contention between infra-materialists and their critics. The actual theory is highly technical, but for the purposes of this brief look, TM, that's a fine working definition of the concept. No. There's something here. You can feel it. Infra-materialists divide the extra-physical effects of the revolutionary state by the level of plasm required to achieve them. At the lowest, or first level, revolutionary plasm is believed to stimulate or invigorate matter without altering its essential properties. Precisely, though plasm does more than increase vegetable yields, it may also influence the physiology of revolutionaries themselves. It's also been postulated that plasm may account for the remarkably full and manly facial hair observed on some communist males. Your hand feels clammy against your bare chin. You wipe it along the back of the book and keep reading. Of course, infra-materialists argue that revolutionary plasm may stimulate human physiology in other ways as well. In fact, reports from the revolutionary period claim that the most radically devoted communards were able to engage in vigorous intercourse for up to 8 hours at a time. 8 hours? There's no way. Your equipment would be mashed to jelly. No wonder the communards couldn't shoot straight. They were too shagged out. Hyper-productive vegetables and ultra-horny communards are fine. But this theory hasn't quite gotten strange enough for you. And on that note, you feel like you've gotten the general idea of infra-materialism, enough to carry on a basic conversation at least. But if you'd like to go even deeper into some of the more speculative aspects of the theory, you could always read further. Of course you want to go deeper. What else are you here for? The book fits quite snugly into your palm. It would also fit comfortably into a jacket pocket. You flip forward a few pages until you come upon a chapter titled Mental Projection and Transference. When a community has achieved a sufficiently high degree of revolutionary fervor, infra-materialists believe that second-level effects may be observed. At this second level, certain hyper-revolutionary individuals may even develop the ability to extend their thoughts into material space and vice versa. According to infra-materialist theory, yes. Under suitably revolutionary conditions, that is. Of course, one doesn't need to be a communist to be attuned to the thoughts of your brothers and sisters. It's become something of a folk legend that during their final meeting, Nielsen and Mazov didn't speak a single word, preferring to sit in silence with their chamomile tea, reading one another's thoughts. One of the minor tragedies of the late revolutionary period is that few reliable accounts survive. Much of what we know of the communards' activities during this period come from memoirs and second-hand accounts, some only written down decades after the fact and of dubious authenticity.
I suppose we do work quite well together.
Your words hang in the air as the lieutenant scribbles something in his notebook. At some point, he realizes you're waiting for him and looks up with a tightly knit brow.
It's true that you and I do share a similar addiction, but that's hardly remarkable among officers of the RCM.
As we were saying, it's generally believed that these effects are only exhibited by certain hyper-revolutionary individuals, generally less than 0.01% of the revolutionary population. Because plasm has never been directly observed, the exact mechanism behind these effects remains entirely speculative. Why are you getting hung up on mechanisms? Open your mind's aperture just a little wider. You're so close to true understanding. Most infra-materialists would argue that the inability of skeptics to detect plasm is simply evidence of their own insufficient revolutionary enthusiasm. This should be more than enough for a stimulating discussion. That said, if you're still yearning for more, you must. Everyone knows books save their best parts for the end. You breeze through the next several sections until you arrive at the final chapter, titled A Communism Above Reality. When a society's revolutionary fervor reaches the third and highest level, infra-materialist theoreticians have postulated that the laws of physics cease to be laws. More like suggestions, according to some of the SRV's leading infra-materialists. Of course, it's impossible to say what exactly happens under these conditions. No known society has ever achieved the levels of revolutionary enthusiasm the theory seems to require. Some infra-materialists have even argued that it might require more plasm than humanity alone may be capable of producing. In the SRV, there have been attempts to organize certain species of aquatic mammals as well as a few of the higher corvids. But as of this writing, only human beings have demonstrated the intellectual capacity for revolutionary communism. There are numerous stories from Samara involving bandits or fascist mercenaries being levitated by farmers from the most ideologically advanced communes. Of course, few of these incidents have ever been rigorously investigated or substantiated. The form of these stories also recalls several well-known Samoran folk tales, in particular, the one commonly known as Clever Oleg and the Flying Magistrate. Among known attempts to channel third-level capabilities, the most well-documented is the curious case of Coalition warship Debutante. It concerns an interesting series of events that took place during the invasion of Revachol. As Coalition forces made landfall, a cadre of Nielsen's most fervent acolytes attempted to compress a Coalition aerostatic with their collective will. According to Communard law, these acolytes positioned themselves at the top of a redoubt just over the bay of Revachol. From that vantage, they proceeded to visualize pinching Coalition warship Debutante between their fingers, a gesture believed to assist in the extra-physical materialization of their thoughts. The communards were notoriously under-equipped against a much better funded coalition. In any event, it's doubtful even ceramic armor would have altered the outcome. The acolytes, along with the redoubt, were vaporized in an artillery strike before the process could be completed. Picture the lot of them, all standing with their fingers in the air 1 minute, the next reduced to a bloody mist. It's been said, though, that in the weeks following the battle, the captain of the debutante noted an increase in the incidence of crewmen striking their heads on unexpectedly low bulkheads. Of course, colorful anecdotes only scratch the surface of what infra-materialists believe may be possible in a truly third-level society. Some have theorized that such a society would be fundamentally unrecognizable, lacking many of the institutions we typically take for granted in advanced societies, including organized governments, financial institutions, and law enforcement. Did that book just say there's no place for you in this future? This sounds like a seditious fantasy. How can they allow books like this in print? Others have argued that people living under third-level conditions will be immune to such infirmities as hunger, disease, and mental illness. In some of his later writings, Nielsen himself speculated about the potential for an extra-physical architecture that disregards the laws of bourgeois physics and instead relies on the revolutionary faith of the people for structural integrity. Precisely, Nielsen observed that the financial system operates on the same principle of faith. So why not an architectural system? On the following page, you come across a few black and white reproductions from Nielsen's own notebooks. One sketch depicts a government ministry shaped like a great inverted pyramid. A hectare in width at the top, balanced atop foundations the size of common apartments. Another depicts a leaning tower wrapped in a dramatic helix. The caption beneath it reads, "The Tower of History." Something about that tower looks awfully familiar. Could it be that's what the students were trying to recreate with the matchboxes? In the corner of one of the reproduced notebook pages, you can make out the following words, written in Nielsen's distinctive slashing script. A state that has lost the faith of its people has forfeited the right to exist. There is no more. You've reached the outer theoretical limits of communism, and in less than 200 pages. If you'd like to read further, may we recommend a brief look at Occidental architecture?
You're back. Yeah, it's hers. She just sort of moved it all in a few months ago.
She said if she's going to make truly radical art, she needs a suitably radical workspace.
And I don't think she could afford rent at an actual studio. Oh, sure. He's definitely interesting, I would say.
Interesting? Isn't that just binoclard for "I don't have a real opinion"? His companion's eyes widen with interest. He has a cold smile.
Come on. It's not that I don't have anything to say about Cindy's art. It's more that I'm still working out the details. It's a complex question. You've got to take your time with it.
You flustered the poor boy. Now he's got to say something.
I guess you could call her latest stuff a sort of counter-bourgeoisie calligraphy. She's got a real taste for radical slogans.
It's too bad she hasn't developed the theoretical foundation to do truly radical work.
I think she'll get there, though. She's still looking for a subject equal to her ambitions. The deal? At a fundamental level, I guess you could call it the shattered bones of a dream crushed by capital.
That's really good, Steban. You should save that for an essay.
Thanks, Uli. When the idea is sound, the words just sort of flow.
Yes, now keep developing the idea.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Not as good as Steban's original idea, though.
Go ahead. Yes, let's get right to it.
His companion leans forward, ready to jump in. They're impressed that you dove right into the most advanced parts of the theory. Half an hour evaporates and the conversation is still wending its way toward new and unexpected places. The cool breeze coming off the bay wraps itself around the Capeside apartments in a nearly forgotten part of that glorified construction site, surrounded by rusted pieces of scaffolding and walls of faded tarpaulin. A detective of the RCM debates the intricacies of an abstruse theory with a pair of university students.
The two phenomena are actually deeply intertwined. Many infra-materialists believe that Bale is actually a manifestation of nostalgia and historical inertia. Those same theorists have hypothesized that revolution may in fact create a counterforce that prevents the Bale from expanding.
Now the breeze has subsided. All is still except for the last bits of steam rising from the coffee pot.
Well, on that note, I think we can call it an evening.
No, wait. Can this really be the end? You feel like you've just gotten to the real stuff.
Yes. One of our better discussions lately, on the whole.
What do you mean, is that it? You've done the reading, we talked about it. What more do you expect from a reading group? Well, you could always ask, I guess.
We probably won't get a better chance. Honestly.
But it's getting late, so maybe pick the most important question.
The question you mean to ask is both very complicated and incredibly simple. The young man waits patiently for you to finish.
Yes?
Say it. The young man considers your words for a minute. You're witnessing his ironic armor melt before you. This is his true self you're seeing now. He's thinking about someone. Hard to say. Someone dear to him. Track his gaze. He's looking out past the broken wall, toward the opposite side of the bay. They rise like electric obelisks in the night.
The theorist Puncher and Watman, not infra-materialists, but theorists nonetheless, say that communism is a secular version of Pericanassian theology, that it replaces faith in the divine with faith in humanity's future. I have to say, I've never entirely understood what they mean, but I think maybe the answer is in there, somewhere, only in this very specific sense. Communism doesn't dangle any promises of eternal bliss or reward. The only promise it offers is that the future can be better than the past, if we're willing to work and fight and die for it. Then you don't believe in the historic role of the proletariat, which also means you reject the basis of historical materialism.
It means you are not a communist, in other words.
Something else. I guess you could say we believe it because it's impossible. It's our way of saying we refuse to accept that the world has to remain. Like this. Yes, in fact. My mom's. She works in La Delta, in one of those skyscrapers. But it's not like you think. She's a cleaning lady. But how did you... Oh, never mind. I guess I'm easier to read than I thought. I want us all to live in a better world. But yes, she's a part of it. I guess we're all a part of it.
You made him self-conscious now. He's practically paralyzed.
Steban, it's getting pretty late.
You're right. We should clean this up and get going.
Of course, the matchboxes. You'd very nearly forgotten to ask about them. Now may be your last chance.
So you really did read all the way to the end. Yeah, Uli and I were trying to see whether there was enough plasm between the two of us to hold up a few matchboxes.
Saying it out loud makes him realize how foolish it sounds.
It was just a little informal experiment. No reason to take it too seriously.
The young man looks at you a moment, then at his companion.
What could it hurt? All right, let's give it another go.
You know what? I'll sit this one out. I don't think you want my skeptical materialism interfering.
Before long, a modest tower begins to rise from the pile of matchboxes. You place every box with the utmost delicacy and precision.
Easy, Uli.
It's holding. It's holding.
The higher the tower goes, the quieter the room seems to become. Aside from the occasional comment, the three of you are completely absorbed by the task.
All right, you go next, Steban.
The young man pushes back his shirt sleeves, revealing the pale flesh of his forearms.
Is it? He's holding. He's holding.
Yes, this is the closest we've ever gotten.
It's almost exactly as Nielsen's sketch imagined, a physical manifestation of the dialectical spiral of history.
All right, gendarme. Your turn.
You've got this. Theories aside, they're only matchboxes. Even the lieutenant is watching intently now.
It's... My God. Is he really holding?
It is. It is.
There, in the middle of the floor, the winding spire quivers with an improbable energy.
This is impossible, right? There's no way it's really staying up like that.
But it is. It is. For a long moment, no one says a word. Even the lieutenant is transfixed. A low-pressure system is gathering itself over the bay. It's begun to tug violently at the tarpaulins.
And there it goes. No, it was exactly what's supposed to happen. We should treat it that way.
We should probably clean up.
Well, I think we're probably finished here, Detective.
Wait a minute, if you don't mind. We wanted to get your opinion on something. A few little changes we've been thinking about. Nothing too major, I think. We were talking potentially about relaxing some parts of our admissions process.
I thought the cloak and dagger routine made us seem more appealing.
I thought so too, but perhaps we overdid it, just a little. There was another thing. We were also debating putting up some posters around town.
Though some of us maintain that advertising is an unacceptably bourgeois tactic.
That's what makes it so beautiful. The irony is unbeatable. As a noted art cop, you definitely have an opinion on this.
Ah, it makes sense. There's already a sub-theme of radical street art running through our reading group.
I suppose that makes it a historical inevitability beyond contradiction.
Plus, I've got the perfect place in mind. Put some more coffee on, Uli. We've got a long night ahead of us. We should probably get Cindy in here too. Oh, and gendarme. One last thing. About that question you asked earlier. It reminded me of a certain poem that you might appreciate.
Ah, so he has read something besides his books of abstruse theory.
It was written by a young communard who was killed on the barricades during the coalition landings. The story goes that he wrote it on the last night of his life, keeping watch from the barricades in the middle of the night. I don't have the whole thing committed to memory, but there's a line in it I think about sometimes. In dark times, should the stars also go out? Anyway, good night to you.
Old King and his horse have been covered in posters with radical slogans like "No kings, no bosses," and "Again and once more after that." At the bottom of the posters, in smaller lettering, are details about meeting at a local coffee house.
Looks like the students took your advice to heart, Detective.